Welcome back to today's episode. I am really excited to be able to introduce to you a new guest that I have. Her name is Camille Block, and she has just completed her very first book that she says has been in the work for many years. Her book is titled Hope for Secondhand Suffering. And when I saw the title of your book and just saw the things on your Instagram posting, I was immediately intrigued by this title. And I was like, that sounds like something I can relate to. Like, what do you mean? Tell me more about that. And I did for you to be, thank you for your willingness and share it with my audience. And I would love to just hear about like just the journey that you were on that even brought you to writing this book and telling us more about it. So welcome to the podcast. Tell us all about you.
Hi, Kylie. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having the curiosity to, when you saw my post, to pursue it. I love that. I love curiosity. And then I, of course, checked you out and was looking on your Instagram, and I was like, oh, this woman is adorable. And I just wanted to get to know you. You just had that inviting presence. And my main job has been career coaching, and so I'm familiar a little bit with the coaching world, and I saw that what you're doing, and I thought, wow, I would really enjoy being your friend and having you coach me on things, because you just had that invitation. I think that just calls people to almost a friendship, but yet a little bit more helpful. Anyway, thank you for having me. Thank you for your show and what you're doing for others. Okay, so as far as my book goes, I'll read the full title because I feel like the subtitle also helps explain a few things to your audience. I found that just by when people ask me, what's your book about? I have found that works best is just to say the title and the subtitle, and they go, oh, and they were like, really, they kind of get it. Like they kind of like, I don't have to explain. So I'm going to try that. And then of course I'll share more of it. The full name of the book is Hope for Secondhand Suffering, Tools for the Heart When You Can't Fix Your Loved One's Pain. And the story behind it is that it's been almost 11 years since I began this journey. The background is I have a brother who has severe cerebral palsy, quadriplegia. So his functionality is quite limited. How he speaks is through his eyes, his smile, his cry, his screams, his laughter, and that's about it. There's not a lot of ability to communicate. He had motor cortex damage at birth. We didn't know how serious it was. But as he progressed as a baby, my parents were told, and we learned that he did have this condition, and it wasn't great news. So I grew up with him as someone very special in my life. And the way the book came about is I was actually at a time in my life when I was in a deep state of grief. My oldest daughter, I have 3 kids, and my oldest daughter, we had just dropped her off at college in Texas. We live in California. And it was just a really weird time in our life. I wasn't really ready to get rid of any children yet. We had a hard few years before that. My husband was commuting long distances. It took a toll on the family, our marriage, the kids, everything. And we were just we're still in that time. So when we dropped her off at college, it was not a normal like drop off. It was heavy. There was we were really connected. My daughter and I, we were very, very connected at the heart. We argued a lot, but we loved each other deeply. And it was just a weird time. So I was grieving, like getting on the plane, cried the whole way back, on driving Texas and then the plane. And then I came home, and then 2 weeks later, my mom, we got a call that she was sent to the emergency room, and within 5 days she was gone. And it was quite sudden. She had been suffering from cognitive dementia, but it was quite a sudden death, and one we weren't ready for. And so I was dealing with my daughter, who is now at college, who was very close to her because she wasn't there to say goodbye. So both of those things happening within 2 to 3 weeks of each other. And I was a big part of the decision-making process with my mom and, decisions we had to make. So I was just in a deep state of grief. And what I found was I just remember I went to a couch, and one day the other two kids were at school, and I opened my computer and I just started typing. And what surprised me was what came out. And it
Mm,
was really about my brother. And it had
mm,
nothing to do with what I was actually grieving about, but somewhere in that inner heart of mine, I guess that needed to surface. And so I started
yeah.
writing, and I kept writing, and things were just pouring out of me. And over time I realized were coming to me. And then I'm a slow writer, I guess, because it took 10 years, but it was kind of like this passion project I
Mm,
turned to when I was, I don't know, in a melancholy state or something. It just there was an urgency of getting it out, but not an urgency in finishing it. And
yeah.
so about halfway through the process, I realized this was not just a therapy lesson for me about my brother and me. This was something for others too. And so the book kind
Mm,
of evolved from, I think, it originally was into something different. So I'll
yeah.
stop there and let you ask what you want, because I could go in a
Yeah.
million different directions at this point.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I hear even in all of that journey, like almost like it was your own therapy, right? Like you're really just like, oh my goodness, how do I just start acknowledging and realizing more and more information? Because those are really hard things. I feel that pain. I haven't personally be responsible for any of my loved ones' death, like afterwards, like taking care of all of those things. And I'm like, that has got to be the hardest season, like immediately after you lose somebody, and then you have to do all of this work and all this business and all of this extra managing to take care of all the things. And then I'm curious if you want to transition to that then of like, what did that even look like then for your brother? Do you feel like it helps you transition to really caring for your brother in a different way now that your mom was gone? Or,
Yes, yeah, that's a good insight. So let me clarify a couple things. One of the traumas, I think, of my grief for my brother is that when he turned 3.5 years old, my parents made the difficult decision to put him in an institution. And that's not done a lot these days. So the younger generation may be like shocked, like, are you kidding me? Most people are. But at the time, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll let you ask those questions later if you want. But at the time, my parents felt it was the right decision. And I was told as a 6-year-old, your brother's going to be with people like him.
mm,
And they were told by doctors, oh, I'm going to use the words they use. This is not, I wouldn't use this word today, so just clarify,
yeah,
keep it in
yeah,
context. They told my parents he was mentally retarded, he wouldn't know any better, he doesn't know what's going on, he won't know
mm,
any different, and take care of your other two kids and be a family. And they told them that most people who have this severely disabled, he was pretty severe, child, their marriages don't stay together. And so they advised them. And they had some friends had walked a similar journey and were advising the same thing. So it was, I don't want to put my parents under the bus because it sounds shocking, but that's the situation. He wasn't living with us. So he was in a
yeah,
home, and they've taken great care of him. There's obviously downsides to it all, which is part of my suffering, I think. And I think part of my suffering is just knowing that he wasn't with me anymore. And we, it presented a lot of different challenges, but that's what they thought.
yeah,
Turns out they weren't actually right about that, which is
mm,
another heartbreak, because
yeah,
different decisions could have been made. But he was definitely locked in.
mm,
So that said, back to your question is, I don't know that I had any additional burden on my brother physically, because technically he was just being taken care of. But I
mm,
do believe that was the demarcation of a time where I started getting way more involved with his care and
mm,
his life. And my dad turned to me for help, because for so long he was bearing that burden, and they were getting older. And my mom, because
mm,
she had had that cognitive dementia over time, she really wasn't that involved anymore already. So I was already making that transition, but I think the
yeah,
transition was more emotional at that point, where I did feel a bit more responsible, and that only grew with time. And so it has been now 11 years since her passing. And in those 11 years, yes, I have taken on a huge huge amount
Mm.
of advocacy and literally become a co-medical conservator with my dad.
Yeah.
And I'm very involved a lot,
Yeah.
all the time. So,
Yeah. Wow. I hear that you realized and learned a lot about yourself in the journey, and a lot of healing came in the writing process. How
mhm.
much of it do you feel like you have words before you started writing the book? Like when you were 5 or when you were 10?
Mm.
Or did it feel like it just always was this, like, just go with the flow and this is just, it is what it is? Or did it
Mm.
give you words, like being able to go backwards?
First of all, I just want to commend you on your questions. They're very good and they're
Thank you.
challenging, and I love it. I love it because you're making me think about this, and there's always layers, right? I've written a book, but
Yes.
trust me, there's so much that's not in the book.
Yes.
I will say, looking back, and I've only realized this like this last year,
Mm,
which is crazy, and I'm not young, but when I was little, and I mean, when Kevin lived with us, I was his protector. So
mm,
there was this little red chair. Can't find a picture of it. It drives me crazy because I really, really want this picture. It's my prayer. Please let me find this picture. But he had this little red wooden chair, and he would sit in it. And it was before, like, he wasn't in a wheelchair then. He was still a baby, but, it was like
mm,
2 or 3 years old, and he would sit in it. And my job was to hold his head. So, and we'd watch Sesame Street together. And,
oh,
his head always went to the right like this because I think he had scoliosis. It got worse over time, but he always had a
yeah.
drooping head to the right. So I would just sit by him faithfully and be his big sister and hold his head. And so we had this
Aw,
really great connection. And then my younger brother was born, and then things got like really busy for my mom. And
yeah.
but fast forward a little bit. I remember after he left, and later on as I grew older, much older, maybe in middle school, I remember just sitting at the piano. I didn't play very well. I quit. I
Mm,
did what my mother said, you'll regret this. And I do regret quitting piano, but I did have 2 years enough to like pluck out like notes. And I just remember sitting there and playing and singing things like Send in the Clowns and
mm.
Yesterday, All My Troubles, these really deep, grown up,
Yeah.
melancholy songs, Time in a
Mm,
Bottle. These were things that I would gravitate to. And it's almost like I had this deep underlying sadness, but yet my life looked normal, on the outside,
yeah.
in quotes, if you're listening to this.
Yeah.
And I had to perform a very normal life. I went to public school. I rode the bus. I was just a normal kid. Probably a lot of my friends from high school and middle school, like they hear this, they probably would not have known that
Wow.
deep down I was carrying this deep inner sadness. Yeah, that even to this day I see that, and
Mm,
I get like a little gulp in my emotions, not realizing that that little girl was carrying such a burden. Um,
yeah.
and so that, I guess, I think I'm answering your question. I think it was very subconscious
Yeah.
what I was carrying. And I think when I think back now, I think a lot of siblings of disabled people feel this way. And again, the book is really not about this. I'll get more to what the book's about. If this is
Yeah.
my journey, it looks different for everybody. We're all dealing with a lot of us are dealing with some kind of secondhand suffering. And if we're
Yeah.
not now, we probably will at some point in our life. So I'll get to more of the broader
Yeah.
approach. But since you asked about me, my lens of experience is that as a sibling, I didn't get a vote in any of
Mm,
this. I didn't get
yeah.
a vote in what happened to him at birth. I didn't get a vote on the decision to place him in a home. I didn't get a vote on medical decisions, on decisions, what to believe, what the doctor said or not. Like I
Yeah.
was just told, you know, yes, he's special. And my parents loved him
Mm,
tremendously. But my mom and dad's reaction was different. And I talk about that in the book, how like people handle pain differently and suffering differently. Some of us press in, some of us avoid it. And so they
yeah.
kind of were examples of both. So I think as a sibling of my brother, even though he didn't live with us, I think I just carried a lot of internal suffering that I
Yeah.
never really knew. And I kind of just pushed it down because what are you supposed to do? Like, there's no easy answers to this. I can't fix it. I don't have a vote.
Yeah.
So I think that when I wrote this book, getting back to now, I'm remembering where you're taking me. I think there was therapy kind of by getting it out, But honestly, I was transforming as I was writing the book.
Mm.
I think that's why it took so long. I
Mm.
wasn't really done growing and
Yeah.
healing. And I don't
Yeah.
think I am still.
Yeah.
And that's why the tone of the book is not me as teacher, you as learner. The tone of the book is I'm a peer.
Yeah.
Here's the stuff. Here's the raw, edgy questions I had. Here's my journey. How can this relate to you and your journey? What does your journey look
Yeah.
like? Because it's going to be different than mine. So,
Yeah. Well, and I love that. Thank you for going to the vulnerable places with me. To not want to answer any of the questions I might ask. So beautiful about even the title. And so I would love to hear more about maybe some broader strokes of the book and kind of just maybe your favorite topic about it or a good story you want to share with us. But we relate to each other way more than we're ever disconnected. And I think that's the beauty when we don't get stuck in our, like, you can still find people that can come alongside you on the journey, even if they didn't have a brother just like yours, right? There's some differences where we can't understand everything, but on a heart level, like a level, a suffering level, like we all experience all of those feelings and pains and
right.
woes. And I think that's what I think when I read the title, right, I was like, oh, I immediately went to, I'll share with you what I went to is I feel like I've been learning a lot in these last few years of just because I'm a coach by nature, the downside, the weakness of it is I also just want to I want to pep talk you right out of the pain.
Mm,
And it's
mm-hmm,
really hard to just sit and
mm,
grieve when there are no answers and to sit
mm-hmm.
in that uncomfortability with myself, let alone sit with it with somebody else. Like I want to feel better. I want to go to the next place. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I can't wait to read your book and to learn about it. But I think I went with it of just like where I feel like God's really been calling me to grow in compassion, to grow in even like we don't know, like it's long suffering. And I like
Mm-hmm.
to say it suffering long, right? Like it means like you're willing to be in the trenches for a while with others when it's not your pain, but it is hurting you. Like it's not being done to you, but you are experiencing it. And it's a confusing navigating
Yeah.
path. So you go, where do you want to go next with the book? You can tell us
Well, I
something
think,
about it or
yeah, I'm thinking I should probably define secondhand suffering, like how
that
I
sounds
define it,
great.
maybe, because it's still,
Yes.
although I think people kind of get it. Let me
Yeah.
just share, and the book is going to have it way better written because I've had time to edit and delete. So if I don't say it perfectly right, you'll have to get the book, or I can do a cheat sheet here and read like the actual definition. But
Yeah.
the way I would describe it is kind of a comparison to secondhand smoke. Many
Mhm.
years ago, we all thought like, well, in the 70s, I guess people were around then, but people didn't understand that secondhand smoke was a thing, that it actually, like, we always thought, well, the smoker's the one going to have whatever consequences from ingesting the smoke because they're the one ingesting it. But we didn't
Yeah.
realize that people around them were also affected. And
Yeah.
so, in the same way with suffering, if someone's suffering with something, anyone that's around them, typically family or loved ones or good friends, they're going to be affected also. You can't
Yeah.
help it, just like smoke. The
Yeah.
difference though is smoke can be a little bit more obvious. You can see the smoke in the air. It's like you can
Mhm.
see it. Whereas you can't see secondhand suffering. It's very invisible.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the characteristics. So if I were to describe it, there's so many different ways to describe this, and I can't decide on what the best definition is, but a few off the top of my head are just like when someone we love suffers, we suffer. It's the
Yeah.
most easiest one. Another way to say it is, for me at least, it's that invisible, empathetic soul ache where you can't fix something, but you really want to, but you have to, you can't. And you have
Yeah.
to surrender that need to fix it and just rest, like you said, in that surrendering of like, I have to go through this. I have to feel
Yeah.
the pain. Or, if you don't feel the pain, then that becomes apathy and that doesn't lead in
Yeah.
good places. So
Yeah.
it's, if I could just read, actually,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, a more formal definition, although there's many, but it's secondhand suffering is the silent anguish and the heavy emotional burden that grips our hearts when we walk alongside a loved one's deep pain. It's
Mm.
characterized often by an overwhelming sense of helplessness or hopelessness. And this invisible heartache is felt when we're close to someone who suffers either an illness, a disability, or a life-limiting condition.
Mm.
And for me, it involves being riddled with guilt for appearing and being just fine, in quotes, but when our loved one is visibly not. And this
Yeah.
can present a very, it can wear us down.
Yeah.
Bottom line, emotionally wear us down, especially when our secondary pain goes unnoticed and undiscussed.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's a much broader, perhaps more
Yeah.
academic
Yeah.
definition, but another way to say it is it's like having empathy on steroids. Like you're just
Yeah.
like you feel so much, but it hurts. And true empathy can hurt because we're
Yeah.
stepping into someone else's pain.
Yeah.
And to me, as hard as that is, it's actually a good sign because it means we have this deep capacity to love.
Tell me more
So,
about that.
well, I can tell you a few examples of what I've seen when I tell people about my book
Yeah.
and their reaction, because obviously they don't have a brother with cerebral palsy quadriplegia usually. I mean, it's
Yeah.
rare that happens, although I do
Yeah.
know. Um, but what happens is I share the book and then there's this long pause. Well, short pause, but a pause. And I describe it as, when if you like you're at an orchestra concert or a beautiful musical and somebody has this incredible like a song from Les Mis and they just finish the song and like you can't hear a sound. Nobody wants to clap because it's too sacred of a space. And I'm not elevating my book because of me or anything like that. I think it's just an anointed title that describes something very powerful. But that's what I get. I get this pause. Some people open their mouth with their jaw drop. Some people get a tear in their eye. Some people to pause and they say, oh my gosh, that's what I went through. That makes sense to me. And then they tell me their story. And stories look like this. I'll give you a few examples of stories I've
Yeah.
heard. I've heard several people who have children who are adult children who have a failure to launch
Mm.
for whatever reason. They're all different. Some they might have had a physical situation, a neurological situation, bipolar or others, autism, high functioning though, but it's time to go out in the big world and they can't. A few years is okay, but long time, that's like hard on a parent. Another example is a spouse dealing with a cancer diagnosis of their loved one. I've
Yeah.
walked through that personally many times with friends and you can't fix it and you don't know who to trust. You don't know which doctor to listen to, which
Yeah.
path to take. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Another example is a parent with dementia, which experienced as well. And you go to these doctors and you just don't know, like how there must be a
Yeah.
solution, but you don't know what it is. And then you watch your parent just suffer and not be able to watch my mom try to find words. And she knew what she wanted to say, but she couldn't get the words out. And she was so frustrated. It's like my heart broke.
Yeah.
And then she just started crying. It's like, oh, mom, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Another obviously example, it's very common lately, is just, special needs kids. There's a lot of a rise in autism. There's, a lot of weird things going on right now. And it's just,
Yeah.
these things are just like dang hard. And I think a lot of us, we can handle like, oh gosh, you got the flu. Okay,
Yeah.
let's work on you getting you better. Let's get your protocols. Let's get the stuff. Let's take your vitamin D.
Yeah.
We can do that because we know there's hope. We know there's going to get better.
Yeah.
Or other things like you have a car accident, but you lived. The good news is you lived. Okay, you got broken bones
Yes.
everywhere, but it's going to be okay. Like we're okay with that kind of suffering because we have that hope. But I think it's that
Yeah.
kind of suffering where it's like, dang, there's no end in sight. And how do we deal with that? And
Yeah.
so my book really offers us an inside look at how I dealt with it, what I've learned, what I'm still learning. For
Mm.
me, it became spiritual. That's my journey. I do have a section of every chapter. That's my own spiritual reflections. My journey was crazy, but all over the place spiritually. And I'm still growing and learning. And I think that everybody has to go on that journey on their own. I
Yeah.
can't tell people what path to take. I can tell them what path
Yeah.
I've taken and I'm on and how I
Yeah.
got there. And I'm hoping that people can learn through watching my journey and the questions, I wasn't an easy one. I'm like, in fact, I'll just be very honest. A lot of my struggles were people, I was raised kind of in a church environment with great people, wonderful people, but in friends too. But there was a lot of kind of religious pat answers that didn't satisfy me. And, I do talk about this. And so I'm probably going to offend everybody. I don't know, because I talk about everything on all sides here, because
Yeah.
that's how my brain works. But
Yeah.
one of the things I remember people saying at one point, like, oh, well, everything has a reason. I'm like, or God has a reason for everything. I'm like, or God's in control and God did.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I'd rather you not say that, because you're making me not like God or not believe in him.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to believe in God. It's kind of like helpful, to know there's
Yeah.
someone bigger and better than me out there in charge, or
Yeah.
at least, you know,
Yeah.
available for us. So
Yes.
when I had those answers, that really made me fall away from churchy
Mm.
answers. And so I couldn't just go to anybody and because nobody's answer satisfied me. I had
Yeah.
to do the journey alone.
Yeah.
And that's the best way, I think, but not everybody does that. And
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do it until I was an adult. I think I accepted
Mhm.
a lot of things, but they never really resonated for me until I did my
Yeah.
own digging and my own
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, there's so much of life that even just as we hindsight 2020, right? Like we can look back, like we're just doing our best in the moment with what we have. And it's not always great, right? Like I feel like that was kind of what you were saying with your parents. Like they were doing their very best. If it was today, right, it wouldn't be the way that it was. Like they would have had different direction. They would have been made different choices, where they would have had different outcomes, right? Like you guys might have had a different situation. So how do we not go crazy with how it could have been? But
Yeah.
also, how do we just have some grace and compassion? Like where we were doing our best, even if all we had was 20%, we gave the 20, right? Like, so that was, we gave 100% of what we
Mhm.
had, whether it
That's a
was
good,
a lot or a little, right?
yeah,
It makes me
that's good.
think, I want to ask you. So I just actually was talking with my mom because so we have very intentional decision to like break some generational dysfunction. It's not perfect, but like I think just through the generations, like between my mom and her great grandma, and then my mom and her mom, and me and my grandma, and me and my mom, right? Like we're working really hard to figure out how to talk about things and have language for things. And so I think of, even I would imagine in your childhood, like the things that your parents even knew how to talk about. So I'm curious, like, how much did they even talk to you guys about how you were feeling? Like, they probably, how much did they even know how they were feeling, let alone be able to talk to you to give you a place to talk about how you were feeling? Like, tell me maybe a little bit about that.
Well, that won't be very long. I don't remember us talking about our feelings at all.
Yeah.
It, 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 yeah. My mom was devastated,
Mm.
and I think a part of her died when
Yeah.
my brother left. And because that part of her died, she couldn't talk about her feelings. She couldn't talk about it. In
Yeah.
fact, when we would go to visit my brother, because we did go visit, like at first it was at least once a week. Well, it was once a week.
Yeah.
Then it got to every 2 weeks, and then it became like monthly, and then it's like whenever we could, and it got hard. But my mom would be very anxious there.
Mm.
Like she would be the one, like she could engage for a short time, and then she'd
Yeah.
pull back, and then we would all talk to Kevin, my dad and I mostly. My little brother he was more like my mom a little bit in that way.
Mhm.
But my mom would like look at her watch and, okay, we've been here long enough. It's like she needed to kind of get out of there. And I used to judge her for that and think,
Yeah.
gosh, mom, like he's your son. Like, let's talk longer. And I knew she loved him, but she couldn't
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah.
And she had high blood pressure, and, who knows, but there's a chance that this is the catalyst for why she had a stroke, major
Yeah.
strokes 2 times in a
Yeah.
row. There's a pretty good chance
Yeah.
there's a connection there.
Yeah.
dad pressed into the pain more. He's a little bit more like I am. Like he was a university professor. He's still living, and very much involved, but more passively now than he used to be,
Yeah.
just because I'm taking on a lot. But I don't remember us talking about emotions. I probably should have been seeing a therapist looking back.
Yeah.
So here's a
Yeah.
shout out to all the therapists.
I know, right? Well, and that's where you look at like, man, like, okay, you guys all were doing your best. They didn't have any other language to know that that was even an option, right? And you're like, okay, great. Now that we've learned so much through the years, and now we have language, and now we have a lot more capacity. And I hear a lot of that compassion that you have for her now. Like in the moment with the limited information you have, you saw judgment or lack of love, but now you can look back and be like, she was doing her
Mhm.
best. Like
Yeah.
she was loving deeply, even if she couldn't give you more or even to help support you. Since you've written the book, how has it changed your dynamic with your dad, or has it opened up a lot more
Mm.
conversation for you guys?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, he's very much in support of the book. He has been
Mm.
my one of my top fans, including my husband. Yeah, we've talked more. I think as a result of it. In fact, I include something he wrote when Kevin was, I think, 18. It was like a poem, not a poem, but like an article he wrote. He's a
Yeah.
professor, so we put it all on paper, and it was dealing with his honest
Mm.
emotions.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're talking more now about it, and I think he's actually more emotional now.
Mm.
He's showing more of his emotions now. He's actually, he actually has been the one that told me this, but since I've been getting more involved, like he's been pulling back.
Mm.
And so he's not doing it quite like my mom did, but he's definitely pulling back, safeguarding some of his emotions, because I think it's been so hard on him. He has allowed himself to press in through hard emotions all
Yeah.
growing up. I mean, he's been faithful visitor, like probably once a week or once every 2 weeks of Kevin all his life.
Yeah.
And I know this has been very, very, very traumatic for him.
Yeah.
But I think we're
Yeah.
talking about it more, but we're talking about it, the two of us. And I think that in a way he's relieved that I've taken on some of the burden.
Yeah.
I'm more of a fight, fight, fight. Let's fix things. I mean, even though I know I can't, like there's things I am
Yeah.
working on and advocating for. And that's a lot of my journey right now, is like there is a role for
Yeah.
advocacy in the
Yeah.
face of secondhand suffering, because while we can't fix maybe the big stuff, I mean, sometimes we can, right? There
Yeah.
is hope beyond. I still believe there's hope for miracles and healing, and there's all that available to us, but it doesn't always happen, right? So when it doesn't happen, what are the little things we can fight for and advocate for? So I've taken
Yeah.
on more of that, and my dad's really just being a support to me, really,
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah. I bet that's a really big blessing to your dad, especially because then he also lost his wife, right? That emotional in the home support and share that load. What a beautiful position that you can be in, to be. You're the younger one. You have the energy and the stamina to do that advocating and do the business part of it, right? But that's great. And I think you guys have all been able to maintain supporting each other in it, because I think it again can still have so much or fighting. Like it makes me think about like how sad when I hear other families fighting at funerals, right? Like
Mm,
it's like
yeah,
when you go to grieve, like can we just all grieve together and be on the same team and it not turn into this like against each other, right? And
yeah,
so that even in all of this journey, you guys have figured out, it hasn't, I'm sure, or perfect. And I'm sure it's been frustrating and challenging, but at the end of the day, still trying to stay together. You guys are trying to be on each other's team, pulling
yeah.
each
No,
other forward.
he's been great. I think, one of my stories, I don't know how we're doing on time, but you had asked for a story, and I don't think I've
Yeah.
shared one yet.
Yeah. Let's hear
But
it.
okay, so one of those stories is connection to my dad, and it's probably my heaviest one. So I'll try to just summarize, keep it high level. You can read more in the book. But
Yeah.
basically, when my brother would have a lot of emergency room visits and calls. So we would get, usually it used to be my dad gets the calls and then he calls me, and now I get the calls and then I call him. But one of the calls, this was probably about 8 years. It could have been about 8 years ago now, I think.
Yeah.
7 years, six, I don't know, somewhere in there. And he got a call, and Kevin was going to the emergency room, and one of the many things he struggles with is aspiration pneumonia. But in this case, it was that there was, it was definitely pneumonia which got in there, but he had been dealing with this weird, horrific building up of pain, like screaming and pain, like just screaming. And we'd visit him, and we'd just see a little episode. It wasn't like 24/7, but it was
Okay.
like episodes. And then he just starts screaming. And then, and again, lovely direct care workers there. I mean, just people are angels to do this job. You know, it's incredible what they do. But unfortunately, a lot of them just assumed, oh, well, Kevin just likes attention, and he just, so we'll give him a little attention, then he'll stop, or we'll move him around. And it's like, no, I knew there was more to it, but I wasn't there. And so I can only stay so long. And so like, it kind of had been building for a while, but nobody really knew what was causing it. So they were just taking guesses. Well, anyway, when we got to the hospital, he was just screaming in pain. And that began what I didn't know was an 8-week hospital / skilled nursing stay. And my dad and I switched, we would just tag team. And it got so bad that we had to hire one of my dear friends, Karen, who is just a caregiver by nature. She's just all heart, to help us because we couldn't keep up the pace. But it was a very long struggle, and I've learned so much. If I were to summarize, which is hard to do, but through all of those weeks, it was constant battling, finding the nurse, finding the doctor, begging for help, trying to pinpoint where the pain is, and nobody knew. And I eventually, I think, figured it out. And I knew that when I would push his stomach in, and I would like pressure, like push my, like almost like when you're in contraction as a mom, like,
Yeah.
counter force, that counter pressure, it gives some relief to labor pains. It was like that for him. And so I started kind of just figuring things out, and I just went on this research dive, and I decided he's on a G tube, and I had figured out that I think it's something irritating his gut, and it was causing inflammation. It was causing this sharp pains. And so I started researching the ingredients and the formula, and came to the conclusion that I think it's what we're putting in him all the time. And it's causing all these things, because he would feel relief when I would, like, gas bubbles would burst, and, things like that. So long story short is, a lot of the doctors, I ended up, I found my voice during those 8 weeks. I found my voice, and I, got through a really dark time. I would say the first 5 weeks was so dark. Like, I've never experienced a feeling like this ever in my life, but I felt, and I hate to even say it to give it voice, but because there's other people who may feel this way and it might help them, I'm going to say it. I felt like I wanted to take my life. It was
Yeah.
that dark. And I felt very alone. Nobody understood. I couldn't talk to my friends. They'd say, how's Kevin? I'm like, I can't even begin to tell you and answer that question.
Yeah.
It wouldn't do it justice to give you
Yeah.
a short answer. And I can't do it justice to give you the whole picture, because you'd be bored and you would not want to be my friend anymore, because it would take way too
It's
long.
too much.
And yeah, it's way too much. And so I was alone, and pressed through it for the sake, because of love and because of empathy. And I couldn't deal with my brother screaming, and I knew there was a solution. I just didn't know what it was. Eventually fired a set of doctors that weren't, I got him out of skilled nursing because that wasn't working, and God bless those people, but we need major government overhaul for skilled nursing, especially in California, at least from what I can see. But got on the other side of that darkness, got a new doctor who was very much more about quality of life. And he was open to my theory about it being the formula. It took still 9 months to get it approved by government to be paid for insurance, which is a whole nother story. And then I had to do it again 5 years later when that one didn't work, But bottom line is, I found my voice. We found the solution. He progressively got better, and it showed me what advocacy looked like, and that I'm not crazy. I know I'm not a doctor, but I do have instincts. I can trust my gut. I was able to press in and help my brother. And so the takeaway is like, yeah, I think we can't fix everything, but we can fix some things, and it's worth it. And overall, since then, his health has only got better with my advocacy. And now that I know what it takes, and that I can trust my instincts, the amount of things I've been able to change in his life has I mean, I don't want to be arrogant, but I think my instincts have been right a lot of times, and his quality
Mm.
of life is much better, and he's still alive. So maybe that was too long, but that's my
No, that was
story.
beautiful. You know what I heard in that? That I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, so I don't know if you even think of the connection about it right now, but I think even just hearing that story, I was envisioning you as that little girl holding his head watching Sesame Street and really just being his protector the whole time, and feeling like they probably were wrong, that he knows what's going on. He sees you and cares for you and loves you. I just think what a beautiful image to just be in that position that God made you to be that for him, not in an unhealthy way, right? Like we have our burdens and our loads, like you're not responsible for his whole life, but like what a beautiful intuition that he's given for you to just be an awesome sister for him. That's really special. What's your
Thank you.
guys' age difference? How old were you when he was born?
I was 3.5. So I am
Oh,
3.5 years older.
yeah.
And my youngest brother, Brian, is 2 years older than Kevin.
Okay.
So there's three total. But yeah, I think when you just said that about um, the protector, one fun thing is that because Kevin is fully in there, and again, he never
Yeah.
was taught to read or anything like that. So a lot of the things I want to do for him, like the communication board and all that stuff, which I still would love to do. I don't know quite how to do that if he's has never had the ability to read or things like that. But
Yeah.
one of the things he can do is he communicates with his eyes and his laugh and his smile.
Mm,
And when I am advocating for him to someone else in front of him, whether it's a nurse, a doctor, a care worker,
yeah.
and I'm telling them like, oh no, he doesn't like that, or no, you need to do this. And he will start laughing, and he will start
Oh,
laughing and he'll look at me with these eyes that just, anybody knows Kevin knows, like they burn with joy, love, connection. It's something so rich. And he'll just laugh. And I just, the other day this happened, I was like saying, like they were feeding him with this little like wooden like spoon, this little applesauce, and like give me a tiny, I'm like, give me a real spoon. Let me show you how it's done. And I'm like getting a big bite and like shoving his mouth. And before I did that, he's cracking up. I'm like, right, Kevin? He's like laughing because there's a lot of new staff and you have to keep like training and stuff. And it
yes.
just makes me so happy because I know he's in there.
Yeah.
So he loves when I advocate for him. He loves it because I think he's basically saying with his laugh in his eyes,
Yeah.
"You got it, sister. Preach,
Yeah.
tell him." So
Yes.
that,
Do for
that keeps me
me.
going.
That is
Yeah,
awesome. Does he tease you then? Like, has he found a way to give you a hard time?
in his own way, like a big thing because his smile is what motivates all of us. Like we'll go and like he
Yeah.
won't smile, or like Kevin,
Mm.
give us a smile. Like that's his way of showing love. Like, hey, I'm glad you're
Yeah.
here. Sometimes he'll give me pout face. I'm like, Kevin, I know I haven't been here in a while, and he'll like give me the pout face, or
Yeah.
I'm like, Kevin, okay, I brought you, and then I'll mention like he loves certain foods,
Yeah.
and he can't eat a lot because of the G-tube, but he can do oral gratification. So I'll say, okay, I won't let you have any of your chocolate cream pie then. And then
Yeah.
he'll start smiling. I was like, okay, I want that. Like some food is the way to his heart.
Yes.
And there was a period of many, 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 many years, like 10, 15 years where they didn't let him have any food.
Mm.
And so that's a whole other battle. That's, you have to read the book, but a lot
Yes.
of battles.
Well, and I think that's so special too. Like, I think the value of advocating in those situations, right? Because I did CASA for a couple of years. I don't know if you're
Mm,
familiar with CASA,
yeah.
but a court appointed special advocate for those of you that don't know. And you're a volunteer, you're given one child, one
Mhm.
family to do your own investigation for the courts, right? Because you've got a social worker who, one, they're concerned about the entire family and they have like a jillion families that they're dealing with.
Right.
Like it's easy to just become one in the number. And I
Right.
think how important it is that those families do have their individuals to advocate for them. Like you get to focus all your attention just on Kevin when he's
Hmm.
surrounded by a team that has to deal with multiple people and they can't
Right.
dedicate the time and the energy that you can.
No, and I can be a big pain to them too. And that's another thing I talk about in the book. Like, how do
Yeah.
you how do you advocate without being obnoxious and like
Yeah.
keep them liking you so that you won't make you won't bug them so much where they don't want to talk to you because they're taking care of your
Yeah.
brother. But at the same time, you have to speak up because the turnover, these sweet people, like
Yeah.
they're not paid enough, and like they're doing one of the
Yeah.
hardest job in the world. I'm right now in California. I think the minimum wage went up for fast food places to $20 an hour. I mean, how can these care workers who I'm not sure what they're paid, but I don't think it's that,
Yeah.
just doing the hardest job in the world, wiping, bottoms and getting
Yeah.
these are, I mean, the amount of work that they do, it's so difficult. So I want to be on their
Mm.
side and I am on their side. Like they're my heroes, but I
Yeah.
also have to speak up, for my brother. And so, and
Yes.
it's like, how do you do that balance? It's a
Yeah.
different set of challenges from the people that lived with loved
Mm.
ones who are going through stuff. There's pros
Yeah.
and cons, of course, but yeah, that's my
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. Wow. What would be one last story or takeaway or something that you would want somebody to
Mhm.
hear about today about this message?
Mhm. It's a good question. I'm not super organized to have a one takeaway. I would say the thing that comes to my mind just because of your audience, and I've read your title, Breaking Through Walls,
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like just speak to that. I think there's a lot of walls and obstacles in the way of whatever situation in life. I think that
Mm.
secondhand suffering is kind of my field to speak about. It is pretty broad, so I think it can apply to a lot. But there's a lot of walls that I've overcome, and I'm still working on overcoming. So,
Yeah.
right now my brother's in decent health. There's some battles I'm fighting for sure, but he's not
Yeah.
in a hospital screaming in pain, right? So to me, I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
good. But one of the walls that I've kind of come against many times is just despair, and
Mm.
how the lesson I would say is, as hard as it is, don't give up. Like
Yeah.
perseverance, sometimes you can break through that wall. And in my book, I
Yeah.
talk about when you hit a wall, how do you make that a door? And like, where does that door
Yeah.
go? And I think not giving up and persevering, getting help, getting support, whether it's a good community of friends, therapy, or literally breaks, like respite, I think is important. I think so many people try to
Mm.
do so much of this on their own, but persevering and not giving up, because there is something beautiful about
Mm.
learning to live in the intersection of pain and suffering and joy and peace. And how do
Mm.
you live there? So many of us are trained to, like like my mom, like, not, again, I love my mom and I miss her desperately, but she would always say, well, as soon as this happens, I'll be okay. I won't be anxious. Or as soon as I just
Mhm.
get this done, or as soon as I get this checkup, or as soon, like, I'll be okay then. And I'm like, well, how do you just be
Yes.
okay in the moment,
I know.
even when things aren't fixed, even when
Yeah.
circumstances are hard? How do we have that inner peace and
Yeah.
that inner contentment and joy? And joy doesn't mean like I'm happy. It just means it's almost like this supernatural surrender of peace
Yeah.
that keeps you calm in the midst of the storm
Yeah.
and gives you hope beyond just what you're facing. There is more, there
Yeah.
is hope. But like I said, you have
Yeah.
to persevere through that wall to find
Yeah.
it. Just stop at
Yeah.
the wall and you give up and you crawl in your bed in a fetal position, which I do. Like, there's a
Yeah.
time for that for sure. But there's a time to get up and like keep moving and keep living, because
Yeah.
life goes short. It's a gift. And what
Yeah.
we do with it can make an impact on others for good.
Yeah.
And everybody's gifted with something to give back. And what does that look like for each of you? Like,
Yeah.
everybody listening, like, what is your thing you can give back to the world, to one person, to your family? What are
Yeah.
you sitting on that could make a difference in the world? And for me, I've never known that answer until
Yeah.
just now. I've got this book. And it's like,
Yeah.
maybe this can help people. And that makes me feel good. Like, not that that's the reason Kevin is like this, because I don't really buy that theology, but I do believe
Yeah.
you can find purpose out of pain. And for me, this book
Yes.
is one of my purposes in life. And if I do nothing else, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I've done that thing
Yeah.
that was stirring in me. And now I feel like, okay, I can take a breath. I don't know. That may have been way
Yeah.
too long of an answer.
No, I love that description of the scripture that talks about the peace that passes understanding, right?
Mhm.
Like, how can you be okay and not understand? And I
Totally.
love that intersection of the suffering and joy, and replacing it, like it's not one or the other. It can be both. And it's almost like I think your book is essential, right? To just bringing language to that when we don't even realize that we've been at the intersection of suffering, right? Like sometimes we just, like, it's almost like tolerance. Like sometimes we just don't even realize how much we have been tolerating until we can take a moment to pause and look
Mm-hmm.
back and even just see what's happening, right? Like we can just barrel through in avoidance. And yeah, I love the visual of the wall and the door. And it makes me think about even just there's going to be more walls. Like it's not this like arrival. It's not a,
Right.
oh, okay, I'm never going to have a wall again. Cause then I feel like we make these great leaps of progress and healing. And then hard things happen again. And it feels like, oh, we have to go all the way back to ground
Mm-hmm.
zero. Right. And you're like, no, we can just start with right here. How do we want to make it a door? And then what would it take to make it the door? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a beautiful
Yeah.
analogy.
I go into more detail on that very topic in the book, but I
Yeah.
agree with you. It's things are we've never really arrived. And
Yeah.
I think because of our TV sitcom, now Netflix generation, I think that
Yeah.
we are looking for an arrival and a destination. And I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's a cliche, but I do use it. Like it really is a journey and not a destination.
Yeah.
And I think when I wish my mom had known that more because I
Mm.
saw her suffer so deeply, and
Yeah.
she kept waiting to get to the arrival.
Yeah.
And I think she was robbed of that,
Yeah.
partly her own doing, but partly just life, took her too soon. So the more we
Yeah.
can learn that lesson, I think that the healthier we'll be.
And I think great when we have these younger generations or we get to come through, like it's never too late to heal. And even just to go back into the past and get curious, go back and to heal what we didn't even know were wounds and be able to retell it from a new space, right? Like be able to tell
Mhm.
it from the strength and the people that we are today and that maturity to have the compassion, to have the grace and the patience that people were doing their best. And how we get new chances today. Like every day his mercies are new. And so
Mhm.
if it is just we're on a journey and we're not trying to get to a destination, I think for me, I think it feels like hope that it's never too late to continue to grow. It's never too late
Yeah.
to change. It's never too late to heal and to mature and to do that pain, turn it into purpose. Oh,
I think ultimately the answer for me was like that inner transformed heart. And without a heart change, I couldn't have found a heart change without finding a more intimate relationship with God.
yeah,
And, like surprise the ending, but the the answers are in that journey
yeah,
though,
yeah,
and then that discovery and those challenges and asking why God, and are
yeah,
you really there, and why would you allow this, and like that's a personal thing that everybody's kind of go through. So but
yeah,
to me ultimately that connection, there is a supernatural answer that helps us.
yeah,
And I think I would just love everybody to find that answer. I'm just being vulnerable with
yeah.
mine. So
Yeah. Well, and we need people to be vulnerable, right? Because sometimes we don't know what we're even thinking until we hear it from somebody else, right? And then we have something to even compare it with. Like, oh,
mhm.
let me try that on. Is that possibly like I didn't even realize? And so I think that is what's so valuable that each one of us has a voice and has a story that's important to share. So I'm so grateful that we got to talk about the book today and to share it with people. And I'm excited to see where it goes from there. So where can people find the book? Is it out now? Where's it going to be?
It's out for pre-order now, which is this is
Okay.
all new to me, but that means you can type on Amazon "Hope for Secondhand Suffering" and you'll
Okay.
see Camille Block, and you can pre-order it, which is helpful, to me, but it's not necessary. It's an option. It will be released on August 17th, which is I don't know when this will air, so but that will be
Yeah.
like if you ordered it, then it will be shipped out. You should get by the 19th.
Okay.
And then I have a website where I post a link, and it's camilleblock.cc.
Okay.
And then my social media pages, I'd say that might be the most interesting for people if they want to follow, because I'm trying to post relevant content that's like little snippets from the book and thoughts for other people, not just like people with disabilities or anything, but like the broader
Yeah.
genre. And that's just at camilleblock.author. And that's both on
Perfect.
Facebook and Instagram.
I'll put that information in the show notes as well. So if you guys want to go find more information about her, definitely go follow Camille. And I'm excited for your journey. So thank you so much for sharing your time. And it was a great blessing to have this together.
Thank you so much, Kylie. You're awesome. I appreciate being here.
Thank you. Bye bye.